My name is Brian Harris. I currently am with a company called Covert Access Team. I operate in both the cyber and the physical spaces. A quick little background about me. I've been all over the world. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And I've worked for major companies, NCC Group. I've had lofty titles like Director and Offensive Security Regional Manager. I've worked for smaller companies. I've worked for my own. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of physical engagements over the last 20 years, everything from IT environments to OT environments. And it tends to pigeonhole me into a lot of physical stuff. So I'll just skip all this. We've got a lot to do. So why are we here? Why is this talk going on? Well, all of you are in some ways in cybersecurity, physical, cyber, whatever it is. The cybersecurity, if you jump on LinkedIn or ExploitDB or anything at any given time, you know that there's tons of CVEs coming out. In fact, if you've missed out on a CVE, if you've taken a break for about a month, chances are you've missed out on tools, you've missed out on exploits, you've missed out on something, right? This is being constantly updated. It's new tools, new exploits. Things are coming out every single day, possibly every single hour. But what about physical? Well, anybody know? Is there even a database for new exploits on physical security? What is an exploit in physical security, right? This is something that most people have no idea about. I spend most of my time running physical audits, training other companies and organizations, and then running physical engagements. What I usually say is this. No self-respecting company today is going to say the following things. We have no idea what a cyber pen test is. We've never done one, and we don't see the value of it because we have antivirus and firewalls. If any company said that today, you should leave that company immediately or, just roll your eyes. But most companies, most organizations, even governments will say, we don't know what a physical pen test is, we've never done one, and we don't see the value of it because we have alarms and cameras. And it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's worse. Anybody who has any influence, you probably have a number of ways of how did your company, your organization increase their cybersecurity last year. You went to training, you hired new guys, you paid for licenses, you did everything you could to increase your cybersecurity. But how did you increase your physical security? Nobody ever has an answer. They're like, well, we didn't. Why would we? We have fences, we have razor wire on top, we have some cameras, we hire some third-party security company. That's all we need, right? I was like, no, it's not all you need. So, one thing to realize is that, and all of you know this, you can do things with physical access that you simply can't do when it comes to cyber. So, when I was working at certain organizations, I do a lot of what's called PCI compliance, or more of the offensive side of it. Basically what this is that if you want to be a bank, most governments in the world, especially the Western world, will force you to make sure that you can't go from the internet and grab hold of the mainframe where all the payment card industry, your credit card information is. Okay, there's some type of segmentation that separates the two. Great. And typically what happens is that you go on site, you check, you're like, yep, you have not changed anything from last year. I cannot go from the internet directly to the mainframe. Good job. Gold star. You're secure. But if I break into the bank physically and I just go to the mainframe, you're screwed. Assuming that I'm one of the 10 guys on earth who know how to hack a mainframe. Similarly, every single person at your home, your office, wherever, you have what? You have cell phones that all connect to the internet, right? Connect to your router. Well, what did you have to do the first time you did that, typically? You had to type in a password. Well, 99 times out of 100, if you just plug into your router directly to the Ethernet cable, you've probably bypassed all that unless it's configured in a really secure way. There's a lot of things that you can do that bypass cybersecurity as long as you're physically there. And the point of this talk is basically to demonstrate that. It's basically to take a whole bunch of things that most people take for granted and have absolutely no idea about security, and hopefully maybe scare the hell out of you, but also just kind of educate people on what is physical security. So when you're running an engagement, I hear this a lot. When I talk to people at really big companies, they say, well, we have a 100% success rate of getting inside your building when we run a physical engagement. It's like, well, good for you. So do I if I have a brick, right? If I throw a brick through your window, I have a 100% chance of getting inside, but who cares? If I take 5 steps inside and I'm immediately arrested, nobody cares. In fact, they look at that as a win, right? What they actually care about is 3 things. Were you able to get in? What did you do after you got inside? Did you have persistence? Meaning, did you come and go as you pleased? Was it a one-off? Did you run into the building, tailgate in somewhere, grab something and run out and it was a one-off? Or were you secretly inside the office, inside the government agency for over 6 to 12 months and nobody knew that you were not supposed to be there? Well, that's super important. And lastly, did you get caught? These are the things that you actually care about. These are the things that organizations care about. And unfortunately, for most organizations, what they will do is they will sell a unicorn. So 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they're selling web apps, they're selling mobile pen tests. If you're working for a security company, that's what they're selling. Web apps, they're selling network tests, they're selling these types of things, right? And every once in a while, they'll sell a red team engagement, or a Tiber here in Europe, which is basically the same thing, just kind of hand type. And a part of that might be, well, hey, you can try to break into the client's place. You know, we can spend 6 months trying to break in through the internet and the network and this and that, and you can spend 4 days, maybe 2 days trying to break into the building. It's like, yeah, okay, great. So what happens? Well, you send Bob, the web app guy, to go try and break into the building. And what does Bob know? Well, maybe he watched a YouTube video on how to lockpick. Maybe he owns a flipper. And that's usually about it. You know, I'm going to try to tailgate, and that's basically all I'm going to do. But there's a whole litany of skills. Anybody here who's done pen testing probably knows that you can't take the web app pen tester and he's just good at mobile testing. Similarly, you can't take a guy who's really good inside the SOC and turn around and have him go do a pen test. These are not interchangeable skills. There's a lot of overlap, for sure, but being good at one does not make you good at another. Similarly, if anybody here has ever done a pen test, and I said, okay, well, I've got a web app, I'm a client, I want you to pen test my application, right? What are you going to do? You're going to first negotiate with me, maybe it's 5 days. 4 days of testing, 1 day of reporting. Okay, that's fine, that's reasonable. But what are you not going to do? You're not just going to go to the web app and say, well, I threw a cross-site scripting attack on the login portal, on the user input field, and called it a day, and said, okay, that's it, that's the whole test, right? That's bordering on fraud if you did something like that. If you said that was the entire test. I threw one cross-site scripting attack at one thing. If it worked, great. If it didn't, that's fine. It's going to go in the report either way, but that's the entire report. Well, but now go take a step back and think about, well, how did most people break into buildings? They try to tailgate or they try to clone a badge. And that's all they've got. Well, that's basically the same thing. You've got to test everything you possibly can in the time you're allotted, well, within what's in scope. In Europe, you have a few security standards that are coming up. They've been pushed back a few times. Allegedly, they're going to roll out around October. NIS2, CER, DORA. These are all basically, well, not all of them, but a lot of these basically, in vague, scary Brussels language, say you have to increase your physical security, especially in critical infrastructure. I'm sure everybody here knows what the Nordstrom bombing was and other types of infrastructure, issues. These are the reasons why governments say, look, if you're in certain industries, critical infrastructure, or any adjacent, you have to increase physical security. You have to increase your physical pen testing. Now there's a lot of cyber aspects to that, but you have to increase it. And I will tell you from doing this all over Europe and all over the world over a long time, most organizations are woefully underprepared for this. The problem is that you're going to lose about 2% of your, I think it's 2% of your profit annually if you don't comply with this. So a lot of organizations are kind of scared. But now, the rest of this talk, I'm going to go as fast as I can, so I apologize for that. There's a lot to cover. I'm going to try and show you a lot of what is wrong with physical security because there's a lot of misconceptions. And you'll see what I mean in a second. You guys are in Europe. I guarantee all of you know what this is, right? This is a standard Euro cylinder lock. You put the key in, that on the picture on the right over there, that little middle black bit, that's the little cam. You turn the key, that operates the locking mechanism. That's all that it does. Putting the key inside turns it back and forth. That's it. Okay? Now, what's the problem with this? By the way, the one on the right was something that I saw just the other day when I was here in Kosovo walking around. Notice how it sticks out? Shouldn't do that. Now, there's a reason why it shouldn't do that. It doesn't matter if it does. You can do what I'm about to show you either way. But I have a collection of these from Europe, from when I've been running around, and I've broken them in half. And you'll see in a minute how easy this is just simulating being in a door, how fast and effortless this is to snap these in half. Now, where did that break in half? It broke in half in the middle. Well, what's in the middle? That little cam, that little operating system, right? So if I break it in the middle, in the picture on the right, at the very bottom, that's where a single screw would go in. Okay? What that is that the entire point of these little Euro cylinders is that you remove one screw, you take the entire thing out, you can put a new one in, and you can do it real fast. Okay, well why do I want to break these? Why do I want to snap these in half? Well, take a look at these. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. Are these the same lock? It's the same door, it's the same mechanism, but is it the same lock? And the answer is no, it's not the same lock. What I've done is I walked up to your door. The attack vector looks like this. I walk up to your door. I take a picture of your lock. I operate a lot in Denmark and the Nordic region these days, so it's always going to be a Ruco lock. I take a picture of it. I need to go buy that exact same brand and the exact same keyway. Okay, fine. I come back to my place or wherever I'm operating out of, and I repin it in such a way that every key that fits inside there will work. Now, there's ways to do this, and it's not hard. So I now have your exact same make, your exact same model of lock that's repinned so that every key that fits in there is going to work. Okay? I come back when there's no alarm on, usually in the middle of the day. I snap that lock from the outside while it's locked. You saw just a second ago that it's not hard. It takes really quick. Now that there's no lock inside, I can just unlock the door, open it, and replace it with my lock. Why did I do that? Because every key that fits in that lock will work. The victim's key will work, but my key will work. And unless you're really, really observant, you won't notice it's not the same lock. I now have persistence into your facility, and you have no idea that I do. And that entire attack vector takes all of 10 minutes. So again, this is something that most people aren't even aware is a thing, right? Most people, and I challenge you, when you go home tonight, take a look at your lock. Have you ever looked inside of it to see, is that actually my lock? No. Are you running some type of Eurocylinder lock? There's a good chance you are. Now, some of these are resistant to snapping it, which is breaking it in half, or drilling it. So if it's totally flush, I would drill the lock. Some of them they'll tell you right off the bat. They'll tell you, look, this thing right here, this little middle bit right here, that's anti-drill. It means that I can't drill through the lock. The little cutout on the back end, that means that if it does snap, it's not going to break in the middle. Well, how would I know that as an attacker? See that little thing on the very front that says Yale, 3 stars, star, heart, whatever? I don't know what all these things mean. But when I take that picture of it, I'm going to go look it up. And I'm going to say, oh, okay, well, I've looked it up, I've Googled it, and it says, oh, this is anti-drill, anti-snap, so I can't do that to this lock. I'll try another lock. It tells you right off the bat what you can do. Now, what about these? This is another variation of this. This is a little thumb turner. You'll see these sometimes in shops, at the front door. You'll see these sometimes in interior doors. But you'll notice what you're seeing here is how it's supposed to work. You've got a key inside. It turns the cam mechanism. Great. That is not the key, right? But what you'll notice is that it takes me longer to get that inside, and I'm still operating it because it's not secure. So yeah, you might have spent 20, 30 bucks on a lock like that, but it's not secure. Now, the minimum amount of damage. When you're running one of these engagements, oftentimes you don't have the ability to just destroy stuff. And if you do, it's usually the minimum amount your client's going to let you do. So, what about this? Now, this isn't something that I did, but what if your client comes to you and says, hey, we noticed this tiny, tiny little hole about this big in one of our doors. Is that an issue? Anybody think it is? Well, here's the video of how that hole got put in. Now, this is going to be pretty damn loud, but what he's doing is he's making a little hole right in the middle of a steel door. Why would he want to do that? Why is a small, tiny little hole useful? Well, because there's a crash bar on the other side of that door. Everybody ever, those little things that you push in and the door opens? Hey, door open. Now that's a solid steel door. That's a heavy, very expensive door defeated by a hole about this big. Now think of it this way. You have a letterbox in your front door? That's a hole. If there's a hole in your door, that'll work. Well, assuming that you have a crash bar. Now there's other ways to go about it. So now again, these are just some things that you can do. And the whole point of this talk is basically to show you there's a lot of things with physical access that you can do that you can't do with cyber. But if I get inside, think of it this way. If any of you have jobs, I guarantee you already know how to break into your own buildings. Or at least have good ideas. You know what's insecure. You know which employees are wearing their badges outside of work. You know who's propping the door open to go take a smoke and walking away. You know all these things. The goal of an attacker is to figure it out. But you already know them, right? You know where the server room is. You know where all the good stuff is. That's my job. I have to figure all that out and then go exploit it. But you already know it. So, just keep that in mind. Now, you may say, okay, well, nobody uses physical locks anymore, right? They do, but we're moving today to access control systems, right? Cards, ID badges. I was like, okay, that's great. Well, first thing to keep in mind is that there's usually, assuming that it's not a self-contained access control system, 2 languages that they're running. The front end, which is the communication between the card itself and the reader. So this is, if you've got an ID card, like I've got my little hotel badge here, and you swipe that card, there's a communications between the door, or the card reader and the card. That's usually communication 1 or the front end. Well, there's usually, there's 3 technically, but there's low and high frequency. The only one here that is actually secure as of today, or really secure, is the one in green. So what's the probability that your card is actually secure? Now the reason for this is that all the other ones you can either decrypt. The encryption scheme is basically completely broken. You can think of it in the same way that MD5 is not really a secure protocol anymore. So you can think of it that way. Now some of these are so secure, or you have to go a few extra steps, or they're really close to being broken. But the only one today that's actually really secure is the one in green. So what's the probability that your office, your work, your thing, your whatever, is actually running a secure front end? Well, probably not great. I mean, the hotel card that I'm running right now definitely isn't. I checked. Now, when you want to clone a card, generally speaking, you'll use something like this. You might use iCopies, chameleons, long-range readers, Proxmarks, flippers, whatever. You might use something, right? Well, okay, and that's fine as long as you have what? You have the badge. As long as you have access to the badge and you can put the device on that, or you have a long-range reader and it's close enough, usually about, maybe about this, then you're fine. You can clone that badge, assuming it can be cloned. But here's the trick, or here's a thing that you should know. Your phone actually can operate as a reader. This little thing that you're looking at here, instead of a card, it's basically just a little antenna. What do you notice in these two pictures? In one picture, there's a light on. In one picture, there's not. Well, that's because it has to be a certain orientation in order to pick up the energy that it's producing. The card reader is putting out a bunch of power. The card is using a small antenna to take up that power and power something. Usually it's a chip. In this case, it's an LED. What do you notice? Well, in one of these, it's working. In the other, it's not. So that's a difference, right? If you have a badge that's sitting out on a desk, and I've got a long-range reader in like a shoulder bag, I can't just get close to the card and have it work, because the angle isn't right. So if you want to actually clone a card that's sitting on a desk, clandestinely, maybe the person's sitting right there, you actually have to put the device basically on top of it. Well, that's an issue, right? That's fairly suspicious. But what if you did something like this? What if you used an extender? So here what you have is you have any of those devices that can clone a badge, you have it in your pocket, and you have a small wire that runs up to your palm of your hand. Maybe you're wearing a glove, maybe not. And then you touch it. So here's a real-life story of how this works. Oftentimes, in the front desk, you will have a bunch of guest badges, extra badges, lost badges, etc. And they'll usually have those right behind the front desk. So, in many organizations, you can get into the lobby as public, right? Let's say you're doing a bank. Well, everybody can, this is what's referred to as embedded recon, right? You can get into the building under false or real pretext to look at the security layout, maybe clone badges, maybe, whatever. Everybody can go into the lobby of a bank. Why? Well, because maybe you want to open an account. Maybe you're having trouble with your account. Maybe you have, whatever. You can go into the lobby of a bank and that's not suspicious. You're supposed to be able to do that. In this particular case, this wasn't a bank. This was let's just call it an organization that sells really expensive stuff, right? Not physical items, but things. In this particular case, I could go into the lobby, and I did. I went into the lobby. They had a cafe in the front area, and I got a coffee, and I sat there and I watched. And what I noticed was that the front desk staff had a bunch of access cards basically sitting right behind their desk. In this particular case, what I wanted to do was I wanted to get access to those badges. So what I did was I noticed that there was a lot of people who could come into this organization and set up a meeting. This is an organization that wants to sell you things. So I called them, not when I was in the bank, or not in the facility, but I called them and I said, I would like to set up a meeting. I'm interested in buying your product. We set up a legitimate meeting. I was coming in to get a real badge. I was there with a colleague of mine. We show up. He's in line, waiting to get his little badge. I'm off to the side pretending to be on a phone. I'm standing off to the desk, pretending to be on my phone, pretending to be on a call. I've got the reader in my palm of my hand. And we purposefully set up the most obnoxious name possible for me. So think of the worst, most long, most hard to pronounce Indian, whatever ethnic name you can possibly think of, and that's my name, right? So my colleague walks up to the front secretary. She's got all these badges everywhere. I'm standing next to one. I'm wearing fake glasses, and that'll be important in a moment. And she gives us the badges, and he goes, look at how they spelled your name. And I pretend like I can't see with my glasses, and I lean over the desk. What did I do? I put my palm on the card. I leaned over the desk and went, oh, that's so funny. That's how all these people who don't know how to pronounce my name, and we're talking to the secretary while I'm leaning over and I'm pointing out, oh, no, it's actually this. Well, the secretary feels really bad, right? It's her job to do this, and I'm telling her that she screwed up. So she's not going to tell me, get away from my desk. So in that time, I've cloned her badge and I've stepped back, and then she nervously and anxiously, makes a new one real fast and gives me one, and we put it on and we go and have our little meeting and we leave. But now I have a real badge. I've cloned it. right? So again, now I have free access to come and go out of the building, because now I can show up later, give that to one of my colleagues, ideally, and they can come in and they got a real ID badge. So again, these are ways, these are tricks, these are techniques that you can come in and get persistence and do different kinds of things. But what if you don't want to clone a badge? What if the badge can't be cloned? That's possible. Maybe they're running something awesome. Well, the badge reader is also vulnerable. You can pull that thing off the wall. It's just a device. What I've got here is I've got a little HID reader, and that little thing in red is a tamper switch. Basically, it's just an optical thing. Think of it like a flashlight that needs to be reflected. Now, you can have different types of tamper switches, but the issue with tamper switches is that it's really important. Is it wired? So you might have one of these, let me say it this way. If I pull that off the wall, it's possible for me to do something to steal your data, assuming that it's vulnerable, when you badge in. But if I do pull it off a wall, you expect there to be some type of tamper switch. Well, the question is there actually a tamper switch? Is it actually wired? And if it is wired and it's alerting, does anybody care? Or does it just go into a massive log file that sometime, somewhere, somebody can go check? All these things have to actually be done in order for it to matter. I pulled a lot of card readers off walls before, and most of the time, nobody notices. Now, this is a really, really simple access control system. Okay, you've got the card, the reader, you've got the little controller on the other end, the door, and then something that's locking, a mag lock, an electronic strike plate, something. Well, I told you there was two types of communication between the card, the reader, and the controller, generally. Well, if I get access to that red cable, 9 times out of 10, is using a 1970s protocol called WeGAN, which is basically just a hex number. Unencrypted hex number. So even if you're using an unclonable ID badge, if you're using WeGAN on the back end, and I can pull that card reader off, I can steal it. And all the controller is going to see, card number 5. Is card number 5 valid? Yes or no. Card number 7. Is card number 7 valid? Yes or no. And I can grab that from that red wire and replay it back to the controller. So that's an issue. Some card readers, most people don't realize this, but some card readers actually can read multiple cards. So if your card reader can read multiple cards and you've got some awesome unclonable badge, but it also reads really crappy, easily cloned badges, well, I can just give it a really crappy, easily cloned badge, and the controller will see the same data. Because the card reader is just decrypting it and sending it to the back end. So, that's an issue. This happens all the time in major organizations. I'll pick on the police for a minute. What do the police have? Lots of facilities all over a country, right? It's not like the police have a single place. Well, it's not just the police. What about a major organization? What about a company that has 100 different facilities? Okay. What if they're trying to upgrade their access control system from a crappy clonable thing to an unclonable thing? Well, they're not going to do it all at once. It's very expensive, time-consuming. So they'll usually start at the headquarters and they'll slowly percolate out over time, maybe years. But in the downtime, you need to be able to get access to that. So usually what they do is they use multiple card readers that can read multiple types. And this is, again, a vulnerability. You can steal this type of back-end technology with something like this, a little ESP key. I pull the card reader off, I plug that into the wire itself, it sits as a man in the middle, and then every card that comes through is going to grab that back-end WeGAN data, assuming that's what they're using, but it's 80% of the globe. And then I just come in with my phone, and I say, oh, about 5 hours ago, Bob Smith with card number 5 went through, and the controller said it was valid. I'd like to replay card number 5, please. Sends it back to the controller, says, yeah, sure, that's a valid card. And I get in the door. Again, that's an issue. This is a brand new thing. It's not. This is a company, Practical Physical Exploitation. They're in the U.S. What did he just do? He just stole the reader. Why did he do that? Well, what this thing is doing is it's literally a deployable access control system. I just put this on a door that doesn't actually need it. And if I can trick an employee to badging in, I steal your data. And then I can just leave with the thing. So yeah, that's a thing. Now, if I need to get to the back end of your wiring, I may not actually need to take it apart. If you set this up improperly, I might be able to get to the wires without actually having to do anything. Now, here's a question for you. You can be rhetorical or you guys can shout it out either way. Who in the organization has the highest privilege of access? Who in your organization, your company, your work, whatever, can get to the most places? Who's the ability to go from the top floor to the bottom floor to the basement to the CEO's office to the board of directors to whatever? Right? Think about it. Now, who has the most security training? Who is the most security aware? The IT staff, the security guard, the CEO? Who actually has the most training? Well, when I break into buildings, I typically exploit these people. Because they typically have to get everywhere, they have the least security training, they're the least paid, and they don't care. They are paid almost nothing to clean the toilets and mop the floors and do these kinds of things. Okay? But their badge gets them everywhere. So, if I use that to make a buddy, so let me point it out like this. What do you see in this picture? It might be kind of hard. Most cleaning staff will have a trolley, right? Just like you see in this picture. They usually have like a thing that holds all their cleaning products. Well, I will tell you from doing this for almost 20 years, most of them will put their ID badges and keys on that trolley. And when they go clean the bathrooms, they'll just leave it there for 10 minutes at a time. It's good to know. I can steal that badge, I can clone the key, I can clone anything. Now, let me ask you this. Let's suppose that you're working in a major organization, and the CEO of the organization walks up to you personally and says, wow, you look like you're working really hard. I was just about to go get a coffee. Could I get you one? Your impression of that CEO is probably going to be very different now, right? You're like, wow, this guy doesn't have to be nice to me. He's way the hell up here as far as the company importance goes, and I'm way the hell down here. I'm an intern. I'm a college student. I've been here for 5 months. He's the CEO. He doesn't have to get me a coffee. Okay, I like this guy. He's nice, right? Well, the difference in importance, pay, etc. to the company between you and the CEO is about the same difference as you and the janitor. So if you walk up to the guy who's cleaning the toilets and you're like, hey man, I'm about to go get a coffee. You look like you're working really hard. Could I get you one? Chances are he's going to look at you with wide eyes like he's seeing you for the first time and go, yeah, thanks. That's really nice. That'd be great. You just made a friend. That friend's going to trust you. You build rapport with that person. He might hold the door open for you. He might help you with something. He might give you information that he shouldn't. He might leave you alone with his keys and access things longer than he should. Making rapport. Now, when it comes to once you're inside the building, after you've gotten inside, what do? Right? Well, I will say from working on many, many countries all over the world, every organization seems to, by law, have to have one of these. They all do. Every one of them. Every major organization has this giant industrial printer. Now, despite the fact that they're all on wheels, nobody moves them. Not even the cleaning staff. And I know because I move them. That Ethernet cable, if you look in the bottom left of that picture, is almost always open and unfiltered, right? Because everybody needs to be able to print crap. Well, okay, I can put my little man-in-the-middle devices underneath that big printer and use that unopened, unfiltered Ethernet port, and nobody's ever going to find it. Why would I want to do that, right? Well, one of the benefits of doing this is that if you use something like that as a man-in-the-middle thing, you're on the network for sure. But if your man-in-the-middle device is operating on a SIM card, any one of your colleagues anywhere in the world who knows how to connect to it is just on their network instantly. And because it's not using Wi-Fi or their internal network, it's using the cell line, they can't see that data being exfiltrated. It's not on a communications channel they can see. So now I'm in London and I just plugged in one of these devices underneath your printer and my buddy in Bangladesh is on your network on the cell line and you can't see it. That's useful. Oftentimes, you have to think outside the box. But when it comes to bugging things, and I said that you can do things with physical that you can't do with cyber, usually when you're doing network tests or internal tests, everything is about AD. Oh, I'm going to get to AD. I'm going to get to AD. I'm going to get to I'm going to do this, and then the test is over, right? Well, that's not quite so with physical. What about something like an HDMI man in the middle, right? What if I really wanted to steal this presentation, right? I've got an HDMI cable. Okay. I put an HDMI man in the middle, and I've got some type of audio bug on that device as well. So now I can hear everything, and I can see the presentation, right? Great. Yeah, this is a great presentation. I'm going to steal it. Slide for slide and everything that's said. Okay. But where else might some HDMI man in the middles be useful? Well, a lot of places. ATM machines, for instance. You walk into the corporate boardroom, there's always a big TV. You think anybody's ever looked behind that TV to see if there's an HDMI man in the middle? Nope. I know because I do it all the time. I leave them there purposefully to see how long does it take for somebody to find it. You think that your competitors, think of it this way. Do you think that inside the corporate boardroom, anything is being discussed the employees might want to know? Oh, hey, in 6 months we're going to lay everybody off. Oh, hey, the source code for all our most important crap is this. Oh, hey, this thing that we're trying to do is not working out so well. I really hope that our competitor doesn't know this. Yeah, there's a lot of information that might be going on in corporate boardrooms. There's also a lot of information that might be going on in client meeting rooms that you could steal. Corporate espionage is a real thing. Happens all the time. So, yeah, there's the attack vectors for physical are not the same. What about security cameras, right? These increase security, right? These are just something that, we've got security cameras, that increases things. Well, not so much. If I told all of you to take out your smartphone right now and start recording a video, how many people here think that you'd still be recording video tomorrow? None of you. Your phone would flip you off and say you have no more space available. right? Yeah, because they're bloated file sizes, 4K, 1080p, whatever you're running. Well, most of the time you're running some type of third-party security company. Think of how many 4K video feeds they're pulling in at any given time from however many clients, think about this building alone. How many security cameras do you think are in this building total? And now think of how many video feeds that are at one time. That's a lot of file size, right? So usually what happens is that if you look in the fine print of your third-party security company, after about 3 to 5 days, they wipe over it. Why is that valuable to you? Well, that means that if you broke into the building or you did something and you didn't get caught for 2 weeks, there's no record that you were ever there. Because there's no video camera evidence. Even if you were in front of a camera doing something, if nobody noticed you did something bad for 2 weeks, the feed has been wiped over because, again, bloated file sizes. Now, when it comes to wireless cameras, you can deauthenticate them, just like any other wireless device. Now, I do not get paid to steal water bottles, but this is just a little demonstration that, yes, you can absolutely deauthenticate devices and steal anything that you want. And if the device is powerful enough, and you know that they're running wireless cameras, as you move through the facility, you're just a ghost. You weren't there. Because every time you get within range of a wireless camera, it gets kicked off the network. And it's not actually recording you. Well, let me rephrase that. It is actually recording you, but it's not sending alerts. So what this camera should do, at the very top of that cell phone, you should see an alert pop up that said, hey, there's motion. I see motion, but I've deauthenticated the camera. So no alert triggered. But if you watch the camera, what I'm going to do is, because that camera has a SIM card in it, even though no alert was triggered, because the camera was kicked off the network while I was actually screwing with things and stealing this coffee cup, the SIM card caught it. So what you'll see here is that when I go to the memory of this wireless camera, eventually, it actually saw and recorded exactly what I was doing, even though it was kicked off the network, because it was locally recorded. Again, useful information, but most people aren't aware of this. Now, that said, if you are already deauthenticating a camera and you have access to it, you could just steal the SIM card. And then there really isn't any, memory that you were ever present. So, and by the way, with wired cameras, they're more expensive, and that's usually why you don't see them as often except in major facilities. But with wired cameras, they're usually running on a Ethernet cable or some type of RJ45. You can unplug that. You can plug that directly into your stuff and get on their network, even from the outside, if it's hooked up poorly. So going back to this thing right here, do you think that there would be anything that stops you from unplugging that and plugging that directly into your device? No. That's a pretty bad setup. When you see security cameras, wired cameras, look around, see if you see stupid stuff like this. Go out on that terrace right there, look left, you'll see one. This right here, by the way, is a myth. You do not have this. This is not what happens. You don't have some poor soul who's sitting in front of a wall of monitors all the time. What happens with security cameras is that if something has gone wrong, if something has been stolen, then they go back and they try to retroactively see who did it, what happened, right? But again, if you weren't caught, if nothing was triggered, no alerts came off for at least about a week, there's no record you were ever did. Now, this popped up on my feed the other day, and I thought it was hilarious, so I thought I'd include it. Again, talking about deauthenticating cameras, somebody's using a drone with a trash can to cover a camera. Again, funny, but it works. And if if you're not actually monitoring this actively, well, hey, you covered the camera. Great, good for you. So again, deauthentication. Now, I've dealt with a lot of clients who have discovered bad devices inside their facility somewhere, and they say, hey, what do? We discovered this really weird device on the back of a corporate boardroom. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it's doing. Can you come and take a look? We already went to the police, and there's no fingerprints. Well, how does that work? Well, anybody here have glasses? You know those little alcohol wipes that you can run over your glasses to get smudges off? Well, they have a little alcohol on them. After you plant the device, if you wipe off that with that little alcohol swab, there's no fingerprints anymore. So now put yourself in the mind of a security operative. Your company has just discovered some weird device on the back of the corporate boardroom or underneath a table somewhere, and you don't know what it does. And you call the police, they don't know what it does, and there's no fingerprints. And you went back to the security logs, and there's no videos in the last week of anyone coming into that room and putting something there. What do you do? Right? What do you do? Think about it. It's tough. It's tricky. Now, one of the things that I enjoy are safes, because safes are hilarious. Safes are where you put all the good stuff. right? Because that's secure. Safe is awesome. Safe is where you put all this stuff that you don't want to be stolen. But what do you notice about all these safes and many more? They're electronic. Well, what happens if the battery dies? What happens if you forget the code? What happens if an EMP comes or whatever, and you can't plug in the inside the data to open it up? Well, they all have what's called mechanical overrides. Mechanical overrides are just these little tiny, usually a cross lock or a little tubular lock, and it's going to take me longer to show you that this is locked than it is to actually open it. So you can use something called well, you can use various tools to get into these types of locks, but it's not hard. And if I get into the CEO or the boardroom or wherever and I find a safe that's not properly set up, or it's, a $1,000 safe with a $10 lock, I'm going to go after the $10 lock. And that's how fast you can open them up. They're not hard. It's not hard. These things, how many people have seen these? Right? They're freaking everywhere. Every Airbnb in the world, most corporate offices, they'll have stuff like this outside the building with little keys, RFID badges, something inside of them. Well, when I teach a class on how to break into buildings, within 10 minutes of learning how to do this, people are breaking into these. Stealing keys, cloning keys, physical keys, ID badges, whatever. The picture on the right, by the way, actually shows you the exact building. They actually taped, well, this lock goes to this building, and this lock goes to this building and this floor, and this, it was ridiculous, right? It literally tells me, what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's not just about outside. What about inside? Well, sometimes when you break into a building, you're going to have key boxes inside because they're trying to solve security. They're saying, okay, well, we're keeping all the important stuff, all the records, all the data, we're keeping that behind lock and key. So you need to get access to a key box once you're inside. Okay, well, it's the same thing. What happens if that's easy to get into? In the U.S. or most places, a lot of things are key to life, and we'll talk about that in a sec. Anybody know what the symbol is? This is the TSA symbol. This is the symbol that basically says you can use this lock on your luggage. And you'll see that on the bottom right. Basically, that just says you can use this lock for your luggage when you fly, wherever you're flying. And the reason for that is simple. You don't want a million different brands, a million different locks, because how is the security at the airport going to check? Oh, hey, it looks like there's something weird in this luggage. We've got to get inside of it and see what the hell it is, right? Well, we don't want bolt cutters to cut into every freaking lock. We want all the locks to have one key. And that 1 or 2 or 3 keys will get into every lock. That's called key to life, or a master key system. Well, that TSA lock gets into, well, there's like 3 or 4, but really only 2 keys that will get into every single piece of luggage. So that's got to be really secure, right? That's got to be like a really secure lock, because otherwise any person could go to the airport, any person could go anywhere that there's luggage and steal everything from any of those locks. It couldn't possibly be that I could go onto Amazon for $10 and buy these, but you can. You can go onto Amazon right now and buy these 2 locks or these 2 keys and steal, well, whatever. But it's not just luggage. There's a lot of things that are key to life. Construction equipment, elevators, cabinets, police cars in the United States, like all kinds of stuff are key to life. You buy 1 key, it opens everything. That's important to know. Why is it important to know? Because it often gets used for crap like this. This is inside London, and this is somebody who has stolen basically a dozer with a crane on it to break into a building to then steal an ATM machine. I mean, hey, it works, right? And this is, again, now, I question the legitimacy of this because you're stealing something that probably costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to steal something that might have $50,000 in it, but hey, the money is easier to, use than the big dozer. So again, you can steal a lot of stuff. Now, in the United States, it's not just this stuff either. You have things, in the United States, you have what's called the arrow key. This is something from the Postal Service. 1 key opens every single mailbox in the entirety of the United States, right? It's supposed to be that way. That's the way the mail guy can go in and he can open up every single mailbox anywhere. Unfortunately, those get lost and stolen all the time. So now everybody who wants it knows exactly what that key looks like and they can go and steal anything from any mailbox. That's an issue. In the United States, we don't typically use those little Airbnb keys for secure things. We use what's called Knox boxes, which are really, really secure, really hard to get into steel boxes. Unfortunately, the keys for those get stolen too. So there are criminals out there right now who can get into any of these. And those keys open up every door in a building. They're specifically set up for EMS, emergency services, cops, firefighters, EMS, so that they can open up every single door in case grandma's having a heart attack or the smoke alarm went off or whatever else. Yeah, you can steal those. You can get into OT environments too. These things, these wind turbines, by the way, it's not just IT, it's OT as well. You can get access to these, easily get access to these. It's not hard. The cost of building one of those things, by the way, is about $2 to $4 million, and it takes about 1 to 3 years to get up and running. So that's a lot of money that you can mess with. Now, this is not just about, when I break into buildings, it's not just buildings, that's not just all I do. There's a lot of other things. One of the things that I do most often is play basically war games with companies, governments, organizations, etc., trying to help them think through problems. Okay? So right now, you guys are going to play that role. You're going to play my role. You're going to be the pen tester. You're going to be the physical guy, right? I've picked a random city, completely at random, and your goal is to find out how could you remove power from the city for at least 1 year. Okay? So your government or whomever has said, well, we're really concerned about this. We want to play this simulation so that we can know where we're weak, where we're vulnerable, and how we could actually fix those problems. Okay. So the client asks you, how could, if at all, is it possible to remove power from this entire city, not a neighborhood, not a building, the entire city for at least 1 year? It's like, okay, well, you think about it, and you're like, well, I could bribe an official, turn off the power at the power company. Yeah, that might do it. I could, if the city blows up, then I've won by the null factor. There's no city, therefore there's no power. But there's other things, right? You're about to see my amazing art skills. How does power work? The red circle here is simply the power plant. The yellow circle is where it's generating power, usually in a big ring, like an entire city. That blue square is usually a transformer, a substation, or something. The power has to be produced at really, really high voltages so that it can go far away. But you don't have like 1,000 volts coming out of your outlets, right? It would fry everything. You'd have electricity flying out at any time. In Europe, you're usually operating at 220 volts. In the US, it's 110. So there has to be something that takes that 1,000 volts and converts it down to something usable, and that's usually a transformer. Okay. This is a substation with a bunch of transformers. What do you see? A chain link fence. In this photograph, how many high-def cameras do you see? None. Where do you think this is? Do you think that this has got armed guards walking and patrolling it at every moment? No. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's being currently guarded by the most high-tech fence money can buy. These are emergency mobile substations. Okay? These are things that if, in the event that the substation goes offline, these things can be brought in to take over the load and continue giving power to wherever it's needed. There are not many of them in the U.S. The U.S. is one of the largest economies in the world. I don't know if it still is. But we don't have many of these. How many do you think you have? That's an issue, right? Because if your substation goes offline, well, how many of these do you have to take over the load? Why is that important? Well, because substations are not sitting around ready to go. They take about 2 years to make. And then from the time that somebody says, I want a substation, to the time that it's built, put in place, and it's actually running, it's about 2 to 40 years. So, what happens if the substation goes away? You're all without power. If you don't have an emergency mobile substation that can take over the load, you're without power for years at a time. And you might think, okay, well, that's never going to happen. Except it does. It does happen. This is Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and for you guys who don't know, Fort Bragg, North Carolina is the largest U.S. military installation in North America. It's home of the Special Operations Command, the Airborne, a lot of really important stuff, right? How did that work? How did this get taken over? Well, because I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it, but if you know where to shoot one of these, you can take them offline. And the entire thing was taken offline with about 3 bullets. Now, let's go back to that picture for a minute. If you stood off at about 200 meters, and you shot in the right place, and you took this offline, first question, how much money and things did you have to invest in that attack? Nothing. You bought a gun and a couple bullets. Now, how many cameras do you see that can pick out a face at 200 meters away in every direction? None. The people who did this, as far as I know, have never been caught. Now, the U.S. brought in an emergency mobile substation, and they took off the load, and they fixed the problem. But this attack took out power to the largest military installation in the entirety of North America. And if it wasn't for that emergency mobile substation, it would still be offline to this day. So, going back, what is your entire power grid currently being protected by? A fence and prayers. And that's true for most countries, right? And you start to realize that, oh shit, physical security actually, plays a bit of a role. It's not just about, well, and I deal with this all the time. When an energy company or an OT environment says, well, we did pen tests, we did cyber stuff, and nobody can get access to it. And it's like, yeah, okay, but what happens if I take a rifle and a few bullets and I know where to shoot? What amount of firewalls is going to prevent that? Nothing. Nothing's going to prevent that. So you play these little games, you walk this through, you figure this out, and you help companies, organizations, governments, etc., fix these weaknesses. And there's a lot of weaknesses. Again, I go back to the thing that I originally said. These security standards are rolling out literally this year. And most people not only are unprepared for this, but they don't even know that most of the things that I just gave in this talk are even a thing. They have no idea that these are actually vulnerabilities, because they don't know, right? And that's the entire point. You need to know. You need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing, and you need to actually go through and fix these things. You guys have any questions, or you guys want to ask anything, feel free. Any question is fine.
Questions? Any questions? No? Brian, I have a question or two.
Sure.
Did you ever, injure yourself, trying to get in? And I'm asking this because I heard this, I listened to a great podcast on Darknet Diaries about physical security. Sure. And there was this guy, I forgot his name, that he told great stories. Yours was even better, how he got injured while trying to get in.
Yeah. So you're always going, I don't say always, but you are often going to hurt yourself doing little things. So one thing that you have to realize is that you might be able to pick a lock, you might be able to scale a building, you might be able to do these things, but when your heart's pounding and it's cold outside or it's wet, you're going to make little mistakes. If you're trying to do anything really delicate, but you're doing it on a time constraint and people are walking around, you don't want to get seen, you're going to have a bit of an adrenaline dump and you're going to, mess things up. Yeah, you're going to, poke yourself, you're going to do little things like that. Absolutely. That happens all the time. As far as big injuries go, yes. I've crushed my hands in doors before. I've been carrying really heavy pieces of gear and I've dropped down and I've, rolled or sprained my ankle. Little, things like that. Yep, they absolutely happen. So it's not exactly a good thing when you're inside of a facility that took you maybe 3-4 weeks to get into, and then you crush your hand or you break a finger or something, and you have to sit there and basically be like, nope, it's fine, gotta keep going. It's not fun, but it does happen.
Great. Do you have, second question, do you have a van, a constructing company with lots of stuff in there?
Do I have what?
Like a van?
So this is an interesting question. When you're going in, you're probably going to have all kinds of stuff, right? You might have disguises, you might have RFID. So even when you're doing physical security, once you're inside, you're still going to be planting devices. You're probably going to be getting on the network. You're going to be doing a cyber aspect of things. So you're bringing laptops and man-in-the-middle devices and all kinds of crap. But you're also bringing disguises, under-door tools, lockpicks, all kinds of stuff. And you can't go in with a hiking backpack full of crap, right? So usually you're distributing your stuff amongst teammates, if you have a big team. But no, what you do is you have to be able to blend in. So if I go in looking like this, I might have a shoulder bag that is stuffed full of all kinds of crap, but then at the same time, you have to have room. What if you're going to be stealing documents? What if part of the engagement is, we want you to get to this location and steal something, right? You have to go in with the bare minimum that you think you're going to need, and then hopefully you've got teammates who are, also carrying gear or other things for you, or you have somebody who's basically a mule, who you can get inside the building and be like, oh crap, I need this device, I need you to bring it to me, so you're trying really hard. There's a really big incentive to bring all the stuff, the kitchen sink, everything. But you have to downplay that and be like, okay, this is where you do the reconnaissance. And you're like, okay, I've got to figure out what the hell do I need? What do I likely need? What do I don't? What can be left behind? And then hope and pray that you don't actually need that.
That's great. Okay. Well.
Hey, some of your examples, you either break off locks or make holes in doors. Have you ever had an issue where somebody else broke into because you made something vulnerable?
So this is a fantastic question. So one of the first rules of doing this is that you cannot downgrade the client's security unless they are, 1, aware of it, 2, okay with it. And it's usually only for a really short period of time, right? So if I have disabled the entire security system, that's tantamount to taking off the AD or taking off the antivirus from a website, right? You don't want to do this. And if you do, you have to tell them, this is what I'm going to do. You have to give me the okay before you just do it. Because keep in mind, like, it's very, you have a lot of incentive to just kick everything off the network or destroy stuff, but you can't, right? The client has to be okay with it. But I will say this, I have come across instances where I've come and been breaking into buildings and I found those things. So on 2 occasions that I can think of right off the top of my head, I got into corporate boardrooms and I went to go plug in my man-in-the-middle device and there was already one there. And it was like, oh, okay, so now the entire test has to stop and I have to say, okay, this is transition from a pen test to like an incident response. But no, when it comes to actually like downgrading the security, you don't want to do that any more than you absolutely have to, and they have to be okay with it. And I will say this, you have to go into gross detail of exactly what you're about to do because the client doesn't know. If you tell them, I'm going to make a hole about this big in your door, you have to really walk them through why and what is it going to do and how much is it going to cost them.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you very much for your presentation. Sure. Sometimes we in the community of cybersecurity forgot about the physical security. And this is the major foundation of the security in general. Can you share maybe from your experience combining now the physical security with social engineering, the impact of this?
Yes. So social engineering is an amazingly large part. Most people are familiar with phishing of various forms. You know, it's got like 30 names now, like whaling, spear phishing, like whatever. It's just phishing. It's just social engineering, right? Most people are aware of this. Most people have to go through that rudimentary every single month or however, like, oh, your company's IT department sent you a phishing email and see if it worked. You know, you all have to go through that at some point. But when it comes to physical engagements, what I do is I try to effectively develop assets. I try to social engineer people. So there's a technique called elicitation. Now, elicitation, the entire point of it is to get useful, specific information out of a person without them realizing that you're doing it. Okay? So I would never come up to you and I would say, hey, tell me what the security layout of the building that you work at is. That's suspicious, it's invasive, and I don't have rapport with you to be able to ask that question. So think it in your own life. I don't know any of you. If I were to walk up to you and I say, I would like you to tell me exactly where you live, exactly what time you're going to be away from your house, and I want to know all the passwords for your social media accounts. Nobody is going to tell me that. But I'm willing to bet that there's somebody in your life you would tell that to. Somebody in your life that you trust. That you would say, oh, I'm going to be gone from this hour to this hour, and you know where I live. And you might even tell your relative or whoever, like, what your passwords are, right, for some reason. The point of elicitation is to build up rapport, to be that person. To get them to feel that they trust you so much that they will tell you those secrets. And then you ask it in such a way that they don't realize that you're doing it. So, for example, with elicitation, you typically don't want to ask any questions. So how do you get information without asking questions? Well, one of the most obvious, or one of the first ones would be something like a presumptive statement. So instead of saying something like, did your company bid on this big government contract? I might say, you know, I read in the paper that your company wasn't, you guys don't have enough money to bid on this government contract, which makes sense because, I mean, I heard that you guys were laying people off left and right. Well, what is human nature? Human nature is to defend that. Human nature, if that's wrong, human nature is to go, no, that's not true. We absolutely did. We're not laying anybody off. We're doing this, right? We have this kind of reciprocal ability or the reciprocal nature about us. So if I say hello to you, chances are you're going to say hi. If I say I work at X company, chances are you're going to tell me where you work. Not because I asked, but because you're a reciprocal person. So you use these types of human propensities to like get them to say things and do things. And if you sandwich that elicitation in between a bunch of bullshit, a bunch of like random talk and small talk, and then halfway through this conversation I elicit that information and then I go back, pivot back to, useless crap, then chances are you're not even going to remember that. Think of it this way. I just gave a talk for about an hour. How many people here, by a show of hands, think that you can tell me every single slide that I went through? Nobody, right? You forget things. We all do. We all forget stuff, right? So if you can sandwich that elicitation in between a bunch of useless BS, you're probably not going to remember or even realize that happened. And yeah, you elicit information all the time. Cleaning staff, employees, anybody who might have information you might need, yeah, absolutely, elicit them. And the real trick is, it's really hard to figure out if you're actually being elicited. Because when does it start? Are you actually, it's hard, it's tricky. Counter-elicitation is a really, really hard thing. Yep.
Hi, so I have a question related to security cameras now. If you put, a live picture in front of the camera, does it work? to getting blocked on what you're doing in the background?
So if I understand, so I'm going to repeat what you just said to me, and you tell me if I got it right. So if I took like a live picture, and I just put it right in front of the camera, would it know the difference, or would it see it? Well, so I don't think that I can pull it up fast enough, but I actually have a slide somewhere on another talk of me doing basically a similar thing where I just take my hand, and I put my hand in front of the camera real fast, and because it happened quick enough, the camera didn't notice the transitional difference, and it never alerts. So here's something that, like, one of the things that I tell people when they're getting into this is buy all the local security crap you can. Go around and figure out what locks are being used in my region of operation, what cameras, what security systems, what things. Buy them, and then test them, just like you would with anything else. Because a lot of cameras, they need some type of a difference, okay? So if there's a camera sitting in the back room, it might be able to see me if I'm moving like this, but it might not see me if I just really slowly am moving. It might not alert motion, right? So figure out what the differences are. I've literally seen cameras where you can put something right in front of the camera quick, and it will not alert because it happened too fast. It needs like several frames of the camera in order to alert. There has to be like a transitional difference. If that's the camera that you're using, then yes, absolutely, you could put something in front of the camera and it wouldn't see the difference. The downside to doing that is you would have to do it in such a way that it was just the right distance to make it look real. But yeah, there's nothing that prevents you from giving that a shot. So, I mean, I would tell you, like, look at the cameras that you've got operating in this region, buy a couple, and then test that. See how could I do it? But yes, you absolutely could give it a shot. Yeah.
So in general, we had a case in 2022 when Iran attacks the information of the Albania, or to be more clear, the online all information which have in the government of Albania. And my question is, if we suddenly are attacked and information of millions of citizens, for example, of Kosovo and other country, are attacked by the other hackers on the other part for political motives, what is the best reaction against this attack? What should we do? Or to be more clear, according to you, which country, which state has, not to say ideal, but closest to ideal politics as belong information security policy? Thank you very much.
Sure. So this is a very interesting question. This is, what do you do if the entire country's information is stolen, or a large amount of information is stolen? The first thing that you have to ask is, what can you do with that information, right? Is the information actionable? So, for example, is logging into your bank, if you lose the credentials, this is my username, this is my password, maybe you need a third two-factor authentication type thing, and you lose all of that. Okay, well, then you may immediately have to change all your banking information, right? The first question is, what can you do with the information that's stolen? The second question is, what do you do once it's stolen? And this is an incident response. This is how resilient are you? So you have lost all your country's information. First off, what was lost? And second, can you recover from it? So let's suppose for a minute that everything important to you, the government has all this information on all of you, and all of it has been stolen. Can it be recovered? Like, do you have to actually give every single person a new social security number? Do you have to actually give every single person a new driver's license? Do you have to give every person a new bank account information? Can it actually be done? Is it possible to fix that problem? What is the scale? Like, is this going to be, well, we could fix it, but it's going to take us a year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not going to have banking ability for, a year and a half, right? A lot of people are now on online banking. And if that system goes down for even a week, you might have riots in the street if you can't use cash. There's a lot of countries out there right now that have almost completely transitioned to a cashless society, and if those systems go off, even for a week, and you can't buy food, you're going to have riots. You're going to have serious problems. So in your specific question, it all comes down to what information is stolen, which is a big question to your government of what information are they keeping on you. 2, how protected is that? Is it actually being safe? And 3, in the worst case scenario that somebody actually steals it, what can they do with it, and can it be fixed? And that's a question you're going to have to ask your own government. Because I can't tell you what the local government here has on you, and I can't tell you if they have any kind of redundancies. Can they fix it? Can they solve it? As far as which countries go, I would say every single state entity is a threat. All of them. And the reason is because they all might have a motive at some future date to do it. And we've all heard stories of, Bob, the 15-year-old high school student who broke into the NSA. Right? These are always threats. So, yeah, it's there. Unfortunately, there is no real easy answer to that. But I would say that any country has the potential to harm any other country. Really, it just comes down to allegiances, alliances, and hopefully a lack of motive. But if Iran stole Albania's information, then it just comes down to what are they going to do with it, what can they do with it, and can your country recover from it? And how fast is it going to take to recover? But unfortunately, there is no easy answer to that question. It's a very, very deep question that a lot of people are paid a lot of money to try and solve, and it's not solved yet, as far as I know.
Great. Okay. We have one more question. We have plenty of time. We are, I think, ahead of time. 10 more minutes till noon, so feel free.
First of all, thank you for the talk. Sure. Continuing the question that was previously made, what kind of drawbacks or what kind of difficulties could a coordinated attack on all the electricity stations in a country could be, or what kind of issues a coordinated group could have to actually take down everyone at once and actually take down the whole country, because pretty much even a large country like USA will not be able to handle that, let alone a small country like us. So why should an attacking team have to go through the hurdle of actually attacking the systems, the IT systems of a country, when they can just take down practically the whole thing? So what is the
Right. Yeah. So I'll answer your question in a couple ways here. One, the trade-off to doing things through the internet is anonymity and distance. Okay? If you hack into another country's facility, whether it's a bank, an IT, environment, OT environment, whatever, the benefit to doing it through the internet is that anyone can do it. You're far away from it, and there's very, very small chance that some cop is going to bang down your door that hour or that day. Right? You have a chance to run away. The benefits of being physically on site is that you have access to a lot more. You might literally be able to plug into the network. You might literally be able to unplug something you shouldn't unplug, or inject malware, ransomware, whatever. So there's trade-offs to everything that you can do. The likelihood that it's going to happen in the United States, according to the U.S. Department of Energy and some other organizations, there are about 100 to 200 attacks every year on the critical infrastructure inside the United States. On power and other things, right? 100 to 200 attacks a year. Now, the United States is big. You can roughly say the United States is kind of like the whole of Europe, right? In size, population, etc. So the issue with what you're asking is not, do we have to take everything down? This is what's referred to as an asymmetrical attack. Okay? Let's go back to the power plant example. What did I have to do to take down that power plant or that substation? I needed a rifle, a few bullets, and to know exactly what to do with that. Okay? That is, when you think of how much does it cost to build the substation, how much does it cost to secure it? Well, nothing because you built a fence. But how much does it cost to do all that? It costs a lot of money. How much does it cost to buy a gun and some bullets? Almost nothing, a few $100 maybe. So that's an asymmetrical attack, right? If I can spend a few $100s to take down millions, that's not good. Now the other question, the point of it, is that you don't have to take everything offline. You just have to take enough offline. Let's suppose for a minute that your country has access to 5 mobile substations. Okay? You either have them or other countries have said, we will give them to you to use. And you have access to 5. Well, if you have 50 substations all over the country, I don't have to take down 50 substations. I have to take out 6. Because if I take out 6 and you only have access to 5 emergency mobile substations, somebody's going without power for years. And that's the problem. So that is the issue, right? You're looking at this, I don't know if this is a thing here, but do you know the game Jenga? Like it's like a stack of blocks, and that's what you're trying to do. There's always that one block that if you move that one block, everything falls over. That's what you try to do in my position. You look at a situation and you say, I don't need to take everything and smash the whole board. I just have to figure out that bottleneck. What can I remove and ruin everything? And that's what you're trying to go after. That's what you're trying to do. And in this case, I don't have to take down let me say it this way. Why did I not go after the power plant? Because the power plant is going to be really, really well guarded. It's going to be harder to get into. I might need a larger team. You're going to have much more beefy security. You might actually have armed guards. But what did you see at the substation? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's not really being guarded or monitored, and there's just a chain link fence. Okay, well that's a hell of a lot easier than trying to break into a power station. So that's the whole point, right? You're looking for the weak points and then figure out how or why do I go about that. So again, asymmetrical type of, attacks.
Great. Any more questions? Brian, thanks very much for your great presentation.